Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets keep finding new ways to deliver heartbreak to the fan base, this time at home, in overtime, losing to Miami. We break down not only the loss, but the critical late game sequence that falls squarely on Jacque Vaughn's head. We dive in next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And Doug, where we start is with a familiar theme. Brooklyn Nets losing, this time at home, this time in overtime, and this time 96-95. I mean, you'd think they could break a cool three-digit score here. Instead, more of the same for the Nets as we dive in.
Lose on U.S. soil, go to Europe, lose there, come back home, lose again. Finding new and creative ways to lose, and this one was a real...
We'll lose on every continent in 2024. This we guarantee to you.
This one was so bad. All right. I mean, where do you even start? I know where to start. Jacque Vaughn. Like, let's just go let's skip right to the ending here and talk about the final sequence. Okay. So I'm sure you were watching the game, everyone out there. They do not challenge the foul call on DSJ, on Dennis Smith Jr., on Jimmy Butler, which with 11 seconds left, I was like, okay, I'm actually fine with that. This is a close call. You're going to lose the timeout. You risk losing the timeout. You want to have your head on straight for whatever happens next, because whatever happens next, as long as they get the ball, they're going to have a chance to win.
Right.
To go from not using the challenge, which on a very close call, like probably a coin flip, right? Like something like a coin flip that they don't get it, but to go from there into a helter-skelter play where they don't use the timeout, it just makes no sense. There's no defending it. It's a horrible logistical X's and O's move, or just not even X's and O's. It's bad coaching. There's no other word for it. It was a very bad moment to not use the timeout, and then, to not challenge, and then to not use the timeout. It might be his worst micro decision of the whole season. I don't actually know how you get worse. It's as bad as it gets.
It's a swiping foul call that ends up going against Dennis Smith Jr. in that. And the swipe itself might have been clean, but as you're watching the replays, you see maybe he buys into him, maybe his offhand is grabbing him a little bit, just to give the kind of context of what was going on in that play. To your point, your options there are challenge the play. And while they're reviewing the challenge, set up the play that you want to use on the inbounds, right? Have a clear identity of what you want to do and how you want to accomplish it. And then on top of which, so you don't do that, to inbound the ball, and maybe you're thinking we're going to go ahead and just get Mikal Bridges going down court, have it at pace. Don't let Miami set up. No, by the way, hold on, because I'm not describing this to say this is a logical option you had. But even if that was the wrong way that Jacque Vaughn was thinking about this, you still at any point could have done something different when you get into across half court. It's 11.8 seconds. They had no idea what they were going to be doing. Their inbounds plays out of timeouts for Mikal Bridges specifically when they go on the offensive end, they are actually pretty darn good at getting him his elbow jumpers, getting him into the little mid-range game. Instead, you have nothing planned, no strategy, and you don't make any decisions thereafter. It was absolutely brutal, and goes, to your point, it goes down as easily, I think, the worst micro moment here for Jacque Vaughn in what has been a tumultuous season for him.
I wasn't interrupting you, by the way. I was just like, I was getting myself all flabbergasted again by how bad it was. It's so you can advance the ball in the timeout, right? Like you can draw up a play. He made the shot. It's the other thing to you. He made the shot, right? It was a make,
yes,
right?
Yeah. Sorry, so not even rebound, let's go before they can remotely get set.
Sorry, I actually just know that, but I'm like blacked out with anger here. So you're not even getting them in a helter-skelter scram situation where like it's off a miss and now you're cross-matched and all this stuff. Everyone's just getting back on defense. They're pressing you. They're pressing off the inbound because the Nets are sort of down ball handlers. And like that's the other thing too. It's like it's not like they have some like high powered guard situation with like a floor manager where you can get the ball up and really kind of like, it's not like a James Harden situation where it's like, I mean, I'm using old friend Harden or even like Kyrie or guys that are like excellent getting the ball up the court. They don't even have that either. So you're like putting yourself at crazy risk by not calling a timeout because like Mikal Bridges, who struggle with his handle, like you have Dennis Smith Jr., like these are the Cam Thomas, like these are the guards you have on the court. And they're all fine, but they're not elite ball handlers. Yep. And so now you're just like, you're putting yourself in the worst possible position. And they've done this a few times where they've let it sort of play, play out over the without calling a timeout. And I think there are times to do that, by the way. Like, I think there are times where it's like, hey, everything's kind of jumbled. The ping pong balls are flying everywhere. Right, this is a good chance. But this just wasn't even that spot. It's just so bad, man. And I think if you listen to our podcast a lot, and there's a lot of people out here on YouTube and people listen on the podcast feed, like, that we actually probably don't get into crazy micro decisions too much because I tend to think that sometimes like the microscope gets drilled down a little too far, right? Like it gets pushed down a little too far and then you kind of miss the forest for the trees. I'm all even screwing up my analogies here, but this case, it actually was so egregious and points to probably something that fans out there are already having problems with, which is like, it just doesn't seem like there's anyone really has a good hold on the steering wheel as a team or an organization. Like they don't seem to know what lineups they want to run. The lineups switch around. The closing units kind of, the closing unit comes with 2 minutes to go. There's no seeming plan to what happens at the end of this game. And so if we spend the first 5 to 10 minutes here talking about one play, which is really, again, not something that we do a lot, it highlights a growing frustration that it seems like this is a directionless kind of situation. And if one set of plays can really highlight an organizational problem, it was those last 11 seconds. Yep. Or like the last 11 seconds were just absolutely brutal.
Yeah, and in a game, obviously, we'll get into some of the other sequences. We're going to talk about Cam Thomas here. We're going to talk about rotations, things that are, even if being a little bit behind the times, changing for Brooklyn underneath Jacque Vaughn. This is just, it's about as bad as you can have a game like this finish, given that it all felt like it was very much in front of you. We'll continue this discussion here, turning our attention over to Cam Thomas in just one moment.
All right. This episode is brought to you by Better Health. Better Help right now. It's around the New Year's. You are trying to think about ways to change yourself. Maybe like just expanding on what you're already doing right, like not making wholesale changes, figuring out the things in your life that you're doing really well and just kind of improving on those. Maybe you've organized one part of your space. You want to tackle another. You're taking supplements every morning. You want to eat breakfast too. This is where Better Help really jumps in and can just be the thing that boosts you, that makes it so that you're getting your life on track and you're focusing on the things that you already do well and just dialing them in even more. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible. It's totally suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist. You switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And when we're done with that, go visit our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL regular season's wrapped up. We're in the playoffs, baby, but that's okay. We're still time to get on in the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We've been telling you about this forever. You have to jump on this deal. New customers over on FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place just a $5 bet. It's $150 in bonus bets. That $5 bet, win or lose, doesn't really matter what happens with that $5 bet. You're getting the $150 in bonus bets. Use them on live game, same game parlays. You can find bets in the Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. It's all there for you over on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
So as we provide you here on the Locked On Nets podcast with a post-game coverage for the Brooklyn Nets losing in overtime 96-95, I do want to talk about that closing sequence even one more time for another reason why they could have done something differently there. But before we do that, Doug, let's just have a little chuckle here. It's an overtime game, 96-95. I mean, this was also from a high level, started brutally, Miami couldn't hit anything. Neither could Brooklyn. You try to say, oh, well, they're playing some really good defense here. That turns over in the second half. The Nets can't find anything. Shooters are missing everywhere. I'm going real broad stroke here. But by the time you find some guys like Royce O'Neal, who comes in and gives you some impact plays, by the time you see Jacque Vaughn make some of these changes and get the lineups and the rotations, it all ends up kind of, when it gets down to that last sequence, feels like, yeah, that's how it's supposed to go. Because you could actually point to a dozen other moments in this game that were really frustrating, that were head-scratching, that were hard pills to swallow, because we've been talking about these narratives with this team for the last month and a half, 2 months.
Oh, the Nets set the franchise record for missed three-pointers. That's per Nets PR,
record if you're not taking shots, baby.
Yeah. Can't you miss all the shots you don't take? Like, they just could not make any threes. To have two teams get to overtime in the modern NBA and neither hits triple digits is like total. It's impossible. Frankly, it's kind of impossible. It just never happens these days. One, because you just can't. It's just too easy to score. Like in the modern NBA, offenses are just being shot out of cannons at this point. So for both teams to not hit 100 points with an extra 5 minutes is crazy. A testament to just how many threes they both missed. 12 for 55 for the Nets for three. 8 for 31. For Miami. It was a rock fight. No one can make anything. And Miami struggles from three. And the Nets did actually make some defensive changes here, which we can talk about. But their struggles from three kept them in the game. But the Nets struggles from three kept Miami in the game. Like, it was one of those things where neither team wanted to make any shots. But if you are going to set a franchise record for most missed three-pointers in a game, you'd be hard pressed to find a game that was a game that you won. Right? Like, it's just those two things aren't really going to coincide.
One of the rare occasions where, whoever shot less three-point attempts was actually in a better position to win the basketball game in this instance, right? You said 31 for Miami. It's 55 for Brooklyn, but only 21.8%. It's like, no, don't take any threes. Drive to the basket, whatever you need to do. One of the things that I mentioned there about the final sequence, and I think this does just lead into adjustments that were made here when we talk about the rotations. We still don't get the starting lineup that we want, but we're getting better. We're progressing in the right direction. By 2026, I think Jacque Vaughn will really have this thing sorted out. In that final sequence, I could also make a strong case that inbounding the ball to Cam Thomas, if that's what your plan is, I'm putting plan here if you're not watching on YouTube in massive air quotes. If that's what your plan was, to just kind of get it inbounds and let it play itself out, well, I'm going to give it to the guy that is the only player, arguably, on your team that can drive at the basket, contort his body midair, and get a shot off. Also a guy that can hoist from well beyond the arc here, right? Like, Mikal Bridges, is not even a knock on him, but we've watched him play this season. We know he is not a great ball handler. And you saw the sequence play itself out as he got across half court. He was met by a first defender, then a second defender flashed. He had to do a wide curl just to get himself into any type of position to take a shot, and it was an ugly one at best. So even beyond there not being a real play design here, I'd much rather finally deciding to put Cam Thomas in for closing sequences in these games than give him the ball. Give the young kid that is supposed to be potentially the future of the core of this team, why don't you give him a chance for a clutch bucket? He missed some in this game. We know that. But you're only going to get better if you keep getting opportunities. Like, even that is also bothering me now on the back end. And Doug's going to pop back in here real quick. He's got it.
Is muting something else? That's how you do, and that's how you do it on the live podcast. So I thought they gave the chance to the three that I know, and it was bad. Yeah. Where he's got past Hero and Caleb Martin screwed up on the switch, and he was able to get the three, and then they drew one up for Mikal. I don't have a huge problems with that. I was kind of just glad that they got Cam into the closing lineup in general. But in general, I think they're going to have. I think having two guys that you could go to in those spots that you feel probably moderately comfortable with is probably fine. So I don't think I can critique that much. And I think that overall, I guess we could just talk. Do this Cam Thomas. The fact that he was even in the closing lineup was something that didn't look like it was going to be happening till about 2.5 minutes left was when they brought him back in. The Nets changed up rotations here. And again, signaling to me that they don't really have a plan. Like, he came in so late. He came in with, they're really struggling to score. It was a DSJ, Mikal was basically the backcourt plus Royce, Cameron Johnson, and Nick Claxton. That was the unit they had on the court. They could not generate any offense with that group. They were down 3. for like 2 minutes. Now, luckily, the defense in that group was able to like sort of keep them in the game, but they just couldn't get a single shot. They do bring Cam Thomas
Johnson as well. They go away from Cameron Johnson there. It ends up.
Well, he swaps Cam Thomas in for Cameron Johnson. The correct move at that point to get a little juice, right? And it works, right? Cam Thomas gets himself to the line. He gets up some shots. Like he does the things that you need in those closing sequences. Like you need a guy to draw contact. You need a guy to get to the line. You need a guy that can hit buckets. But the fact that it came in so late, one signal me that it's like sort of like begrudgingly makes the move, like doesn't really want to do it, and because it's just so late in a sequence to have it come in. They end up closing with it, and they end up going to overtime with it. And so I guess like credit there for doing it, but it just, again, going back to the beginning, signals a team that doesn't really know if they're coming or going with certain players and what combinations they want to run.
And that's why, one thing I'll say, it's not begrudging. They don't know. They don't know what the right thing is, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Spencer Dinwiddie has now been buried on the bench, right? Because they thought maybe that was the answer. And early in the season, it looked like it was your best option. Then you think, well, with contract, we brought in the Twins. We have Cameron Johnson. Then you've seen your sample size keeps growing. This guy is not going to be a clutch bucket getter for you when you need him in crunch time. And as we've also learned, defensively, these guys are not 1v1 stoppers. Their versatility is nice, but it doesn't represent the same type of value of, hey, go out there and get a critical stop here. To rewind it back just for a second here to the top of this game, when it finally came into bringing in guys off the bench, it was Dennis Smith Jr. and it was Cam Thomas. And that backcourt together, that's what got the Nets kind of going here, right? They hung their hat on some of the defensive value, missed shots for Miami, but that was the combination that really sparked things. So to your point, this is also another in-game thing for Jacque Vaughn. You saw in real time at the end of the first quarter what happened when you brought in those two players. So even though you're giving up size, even though you're not sure what are the other 3-player combinations we're going to go with, it's going to be Claxton, it's going to be McHale. Dorian Finney-Smith ends up not being a part of that. It's Royce O'Neal because he's having a good game. Fine, you're playing a smaller lineup, but give me the last 5 minutes of the game. The fact that, to your point, it takes until after you're at the 2:30 mark to get to what, at least in even just this one game, look like the right combination of players to give you a chance to win. It always feels like you're hoping something happens that takes the hard decision out of your hands. If you're Jacque Vaughn,
that's a good call. Right? That's a great way to put it. You're hoping that like it's just good enough so you can go back to the thing that you want to do, right? Which is
Johnson
like
hits a 3 and you go, oh, there you go. He got one late in the game. We can keep him in.
And like
if he does,
Johnson didn't do him any favors. He missed every shot. Like he missed every single shot. And maybe like, you shoot those 100 times and the guy's a 40% 3-point shooter for his career. Like a bunch of them should go down. So like maybe it is correct. And that's actually why we typically, going back to, I'm getting away from a lot of like sort of core tenets of like sort of what we don't do on the podcast, which is like, I'm not even for riding hot hand stuff. I'm all for like, hey, sometimes guys are having good games, but it's usually within the confines if you understand how your team is made, right? Like,
right.
A good example of this is like you go across, watch the Cleveland game tonight. Sam Merrill is like 4 for 6, can't miss from 3. He comes out because it's part of his rotation. It doesn't like he doesn't keep playing because he keeps shooting because he's shooting threes. He's out at 20 minutes because they're going to close with the closing group that they've established as the group. I'm using it as an example because I'm all for staying within the confines of the rotations that you've kind of established. The Nets haven't done that. They don't know. Like, they don't know where they're going, if they're coming or going in this. So you don't know who to play. So it's like, oh, Cameron Johnson can't make threes. Okay, it was 2 minutes left. Get Cam Thomas back in there and see if we can win. It almost works. Probably should have. They screwed up at the end. But it's like, it's this helter-skelter. No one knows what their roles are. Dinwiddie's buried. We'll talk about him in a second too. But it's like, it's just this whole feeling of, I don't know. So hopefully it works, right?
Well, and by the way,
that's just like been a theme.
And by the way, this is something that you often reference and we use on the show a lot. Good process, bad result. Don't be dissuaded from the process, right? Keep going back to the process because it works. But no process, then you don't know how to judge the results, as you reference, right? When you have rotations and they're designated and you understand what people and players are supposed to be doing situationally, then you always go back to that well because you believe the law of averages gets you across the finish line. You don't have the law of averages right now, or all the averages you have tell you that you're a bad basketball team. Coming up here in a second, let's talk about Spencer Dinwiddie, his current standing on this roster, and if it tells us anything at all about what this organization plans to do as they move towards and beyond the trade deadline. We'll do that in just 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at JCE Medical. Look, we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life. Let's just talk for a minute about preparing for real life. There's a ton of stuff going on out there. You don't want to be caught unprepared. According to the FDA, pharmacy's been running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin in the middle of this flu season, one of the worst ones in over a decade. It could be really, really scary. I can't imagine and have imagined being a more helpless feeling than if me or one of my kids just get sick. Well, the supply chain issues are kind of screwing all this stuff up. They need the life-saving medication. Thankfully, we're all going to be okay. This is JCE Medical, my friends. The JCE case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, among other things. Look, this stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jcemedical.com. Complete your physician encounter, be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. That's all good news across the board. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jcemedical.com. Use the offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. jcemedical.com. Offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. jcemedical.com.
All right, so as we continue our wrap-up show, the post-game 96-95 overtime loss for the Brooklyn Nets at home against the Miami Heat, we remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories all day long with the local experts of Locked On. Plus, our national shows are also covering every single major sports league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Now, the other thing that happened here that we've been kind of calling for, and you and I, as we've said, we advocated for Spencer Dinwiddie, by the way, based on results, being the guy that you had in the backcourt and someone by law of what you have available needed to be your starter in the backcourt. But that's shifted. Dennis Smith Jr. has come on. Also, Spencer Dinwiddie has run absolutely horrible from every angle of the court, and he's not a big defensive value either. So Jacques Vaughn at least has made that change. What do you think that indicates?
Well, have they? They make the change at the end of the games. We're
not going to Doug. Jacques Vaughn's not going to do it like in totality. He's going to do it in a way that kind of throws off the rhythm of the team overall and makes it hard to trust yourself.
Look, we said before that I thought they were going to make a change 2 games ago, and I keep waiting for them to kind of win one of these ones to sort of say, hey, this is what we're going to end up doing, right? Because this has happened a couple times with DSJ where it's sort of, are they going to make a change? Dinwiddie's it's been horrible. It looks worse. Somehow almost looks worse than these box scores, because if you go through his last 6 games, 3 points, 2 points, 5 points, 23 points, 11 points, 0 points. Yep. That is his last 6 games. And that's your starting point guard. And you're like, oh, no problem. He's getting assists, right? Okay. No, 1, 3, 5, 4, 5, 5. It's there's nothing happening here. There's no juice. It looks, the shots are short. There's no offensive initiation. I'd be begging right now to watch Dinwiddie complain to a ref about getting fouled, except he doesn't drive the rim anymore. So think about the last time, which drives us all nuts, by the way, right? When it's he raises the arm up and he wants to have a foul, but I haven't seen that in any games because he's not driving the rim. He's just not doing anything. And if he's not doing those things, he just can't be the starting point guard. There's no juice, and he looks, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if there's he wants out, or he feels like he's going to be traded, or it's just kind of not happening for him, or I don't know, or it's just a blip. It could be any of those things, but man, they can't start him next game, right?
I don't see. Well, and it's twofold. First, we don't do a lot of the speculation, but there's been a lot of times when Spencer Dinwiddie has commented about what the core of this team is, right, and the guys that are going to matter going forward. He leaves himself out of it. He leaves himself out of those conversations, almost knowing, whether it's because the contract's expiring or because of his age, that he's not long for what the future of this team is going to look like. That being said, maybe there is some factor of that hey, after the deadline, some moves or decisions are going to get made here. You couple that with the fact that Dennis Smith Jr. in a game like tonight, 32 minutes. Now it's 3 of 8. It's 1 of 4 from beyond the arc. Only gets to the line twice, but 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals, right? A block in there, 8 points coming off the bench, plus 10 in the game as well. You can also just see that there's a better option now. Whether or not you knew it early on, a lot of new players coming in here, right? You're trying to figure out combinations. If you If you wanted to tell me that Jock Vaughn was saying, well, we're leaning on what we know from last year because we do have to have some type of consistency, that's fine. But now we're beyond that, right? Now we're to the place where 30-plus minutes of Dennis Smith Jr. is clearly more valuable than Spencer Dinwiddie. And on top of which, if you want to get more Cam Thomas in the game, this was always the problem. Spencer Dinwiddie and Cam Thomas can't play together. Well, here you go. Put Cam Thomas in the starting lineup as well because you have Dennis Smith Jr. in there now too.
Yeah, and I wonder if this is the showcase because before the game, I tweeted out that to try a starting lineup of DSJ, Cam Thomas, McHale, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Claxton.
Yeah,
and actually that was their first rotation. Like that was the group it was the exact 5 guys because those Dennis Smith Jr. and Cam Thomas checked in together for Dinwiddie and Cam Johnson. And that, plus 10 for DSJ, plus 9 for Cam Thomas because they can complement each other well. And yeah, look, do you lose some ball handling with Dennis Smith Jr. and like 3-point shooting? Theoretically you do from Dinwiddie. It's a massive defensive upgrade. And it's just one of those situations where it's just like, you got to just probably have some more juice here. The Nets, one of the core things too, that they did tonight's game, which was really nice to see. And DSJ would help with this also. If they wanted to do it. I mean, he can play drop or switch, but they switched a ton. They switched exclusively in the first half. At halftime went back and just real quick watched like 3/4 of their defensive possessions that were in non-transitions, and they switched like every single action. And by the way, it totally worked. Like they generate 1 million turnovers. They averaged like something like 11.4 blocks plus steals the game. They had 11 at halftime. They were generating a ton of steals, a ton of blocks. They were like these half steal blocks. Mostly because I think the Heat were caught off guard. They didn't think they were going to do all that switching, and they were just playing to the strength of their thing. DSJ helps with that also. Dinwiddie was fine in that too, by the way. It was like mostly an offensive problem. But I do think I wonder if that showcase thing is like they're just going to have to just make the change now because I actually don't know why you have a place. I hate the placeholder starting lineup when you have another lineup. I've always hated when teams do this. Some teams would just they would start a random center. So I'm going forever here, but I just hate when teams do this. And that's where the Nets feel like they are now. It's like a placeholder starting lineup because these are the veterans and this is who we need to make feel good. And then it's like other guys are going to end up playing more. And I just don't agree with that. Like they're not at a point in a franchise where you need to play someone because it has to be a meritocracy. It can't be a contractocracy around who gets to play.
Not when you're this team, not when you're losing nearly every game that you play. At some point, there's no lineup that you could put out there that wouldn't at least be on its surface go, sure, why not try that thing? And I will close this out, as we say, live on YouTube. We'll stick around for a few minutes, as we always like to do with all the faithful fans over there, and appreciate you. I'll close out with the idea here, though, that I think this is all going to the same place. Like everything that's gone on over the start of this first half of the season and pushing towards this deadline. I think it's going to end up, whether or not this was fully the intended plan, it's going to end up with Cam Thomas kind of being the guy that's going to be getting a lot of run here, developing him, DSJ. I think that Spencer Dinwiddie's probably going to be gone. Maybe Dorian, a couple of these veterans are not going to be here. And I think it's just been a slow burn to it. And I think the process of getting there has been probably one of the worst paths you could have taken in terms of not mixing in more of the young guys sooner and more consistently. But I think it's all going to end up in the same place in the end. And we're probably not going to love what we see here over the short term because it's still going to be these ceremonial starting lineups. And it's still going to be a lot of minutes for guys that probably don't deserve it. So it is what it is as the Nets, again, lose another game here, this time to Miami at home. And right back at it. I don't know what else expectations can be here because they do not put together a complete game, whether it's the players on the court or the coaches behind the bench.
All right, we're going to stick around here over in YouTube for a few extra minutes, a little bit shorter than usual. So I know people are riled up here after the loss. We are too, but we got some other contractual stuff that we need to get to, but we will stick around for a few minutes. In the meantime, make sure you're subscribed to YouTube. Locked On Nets pushing towards 7,000 subscribers. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you can get us in your ears every single day. Leave 5 stars as a rating too. If it's not 5 stars, don't bother, but make sure you get over there 5 stars. That helps boost it. It's totally free for you. It really helps us.
I don't just want words, parentheses, Jock Vaughn. If that's all you have for me, you'd better go. And that is Frank Scott Fitzgerald.
Oh, all-time great poets. R.I.P. We'll be back again tomorrow in a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah. All right, when the post-game podcast ends, the pod begins. Abbreviated edition, as we always welcome in everybody over on YouTube. There's a couple of things that I was starring here, Doug, as we were working our way through the regular podcast. Figure we can get into those just because they brought up some kind of high-level discussions. One of which was this one was talking about Doug always loves these. True, Doug. So obviously they agree with you first and foremost from Ray, but no one on this team is consistent enough to play consistently, which actually I think feeds into what we're discussing here. It should be anybody should get a look here. There's no player that specifically creates a hierarchy, maybe shy of Mikal Bridges, because even after his lull, right? Everything else is up for grabs. That's the point, right? That's why you should see 1,000 lineups before you see 3.
Yeah, I think Mikal plays all the minutes. I think with Sharp out, Claxton plays all the minutes. And after that, it's just mix and match what works. Now, I do think you should try out things for long enough times to get good sample sizes. Like, I don't think you should be like, hey, they missed 4 3-pointers. That lineup doesn't work. I don't think that's good process. I just think at this point, like with Dinwiddie specifically, we've just seen this is not working. And they just have to, and he's not part of the long-term plan. So they just need to make some other choices here. Right. Yeah. And I think with Cameron Johnson, it's been just kind of whatever, right? Like it's not been good enough to like feel like he should play. And by the way, he doesn't, right? His minutes have been pretty low, all things considered, right? He hasn't been locked into closing roles every single time. I mean, his minutes are 23 this game in overtime, 23 last game, sort of close-ish. 29 in regulation against Portland, 32, 26. Like now, some of that was like the hamstring stuff where it's cramping, but it doesn't feel like his role is ultra safe either, even though he'll probably get the benefit of the doubt a little bit longer than anybody else. Yeah. But no, I agree. I mean, the team isn't, they don't have their hierarchy is not so well defined because they don't just have crazy talent. Like they just don't, like they don't have a superstar. They have maybe some guys who could push top 50-ish, right? Like top 40 maybe, but really not much higher than that probably. And so I do think it's worth it to try different things. I just think that, like I said before, I just think they're not sure of like what they want to do.
And this is why, by the way, why it should always come back to, this is why you should have some of these young guys up from the G League, and even it's not, again, like Trendon Watford and matchups. He played 4 minutes tonight. Like that one, like you bring him in for a 4-minute spurt in the second half. Like either use him or don't use him. I mean, same thing, like, it's like the Giles thing. This guy clearly doesn't exist on this roster. Why is he here? Use these guys. Nobody is more deserving of minutes than anybody else inside of this pecking order. 2 quick ones here from Hal, just because completely disagree, guys. Sorry, 11 seconds does not make the second half as brutal as it was game as with the 3. So just it's just indicative of it. The last 11.8 seconds is the most brutal moment, and it's the microcosm of anything else that you think was bad, the bad shooting or not knocking down shots, having Cameron Johnson run otherworldly cold. But on a high level, yes, the last 11 seconds is the most brutal moment of that game because you're down 1 point, and a well-constructed play wins you that basketball game most likely.
It just sums up the other problems. Like it's not, it's a look, everyone can make mistakes. I get it. It's where I think we've probably not stepped our foot on the gas on ripping the players, ripping Jock Vaughn a lot. Like we just don't really do that a ton. I think we are pretty honest about it, but I think we're pretty even keeled about this stuff too. And don't go nuts on stuff. To me, it just highlighted like a growing problem of like sort of just not knowing what's happening here. And I think that's mostly why we focused on it, if I'm reading that comment correctly.
And the quick double up just from Hal as well was about, I'm not as big a fanboy as we're fanboys apparently of Cam Thomas. That's good to know. But he needs to go.
That'd be the first time anyone ever called us that, man. That's a first.
We've been dragged going the other direction around our stance on Cam Thomas
so much.
And also in regards to about not to knock on you here, Hal, but in terms of he needs to go as most value is right now. I mean, if we're talking about moving players and wanting to create room for other guys to grow and expand their game, Cam Thomas is the guy you want playing maximum minutes here. His value will only get better from here. He's under contract. You can move him another day if you want to go that route, or you could keep the young player that can score buckets whenever he feels like it on your roster and move on from a lot of 30-year-old plus veterans. I'm going to frame
the part where someone calls us a Cam Thomas fanboy. We've had many arguments going the other way where I've not actually, thought that the extreme upside, and I still kind of don't on some level, right? Because I just think the two-way stuff. Although the defense for him tonight, there was at least effort. Like they did blitz Bam a lot, and he was part of that action, and like that's good for him. I know there was a lapse at the end where he was arguing a foul call, didn't get track back on Hero, but whatever, like it happens.
But again, growing pains, like fine, like like learning lessons, growing pains.
I'll tell you right now, it's really good for him to be paired with Dennis. This is why also I want him paired with Dennis Smith Jr. because you cannot be lackadaisical on defense when you share the court with that guy. Like the motor is so high on defense for him that it's addition by just by looking at it, everyone else looking at him and be like, well, I got to go at least as hard as that because that guy's just so dialed in on defense. And I really like pairing Thomas with him on that end for at least the effort, right? Like, I don't think he gets lost in rotations, but I'm not even saying that as a knock, like, but it happens, but it's just, you can make up for a lot of that with effort. On the defensive end, and there was effort for him on the defensive end tonight for sure.
And they're both a little undersized, right? They're both explosive going to the basket. They're not the same, same model player at all, but it's like you can instill a little bit of that into Cam Thomas because he can look right at Dennis Smith Jr. kind of say, there's some identity here that I could pick up from him. Last couple of quick ones here from Nader. It's hard for me to give JV credit for the good things that are likely group decisions anyhow, because he repeatedly demonstrated that he can single-handedly botch a game like tonight. And this actually is a part of it where, like, even the things, so if you don't have the last 11 8-point seconds, maybe we come in and we say, was he too late getting to that closing group? Yes, but at least he's getting to them, right? Like, at least he went with that unit to close out regulation. He has them in overtime, right? Like, you want to applaud the good decisions, but for every positive or silver line you take out of it, there's the losing streak, there's the bad decision-making or game management. So Jacque Vaughn has made it very hard to look past some of the mistakes because the successes don't seem nearly as strong.
Well, they lose a lot. It's going to be easy to just drag the coach too, and you lose every game too. They're losing every single game. At some point, even if you're defending the guy, it's like impossible to defend. And like I said, I think there were fine decisions in this game. Like I said, they switched all the actions against a team that you definitely want to do that against, right? Like they allowed the 3-pointer because they were just like going to make sure they double Bam every single chance they got. That worked, right? Yeah. Like they were doing things that were good coaching, I think, but it doesn't really matter in the end. Like if you're gonna botch some of these decisions, it's like, what are we gonna do 30 minutes about all the little micro X's and O's things that kind of went okay? It'd be crazy. No one would take it seriously.
I want to get this last one here before we'll close out, but I'll also just mention, because I was thinking about this coming into the game, it's like, and we know the Nets have been on a horrendous losing streak of late, but when you look at them like in the Eastern Conference standing, and we talked about a lot of these teams, the Pacers, the Knicks, the Magic. But then you look and you're like, yep, like they're all in that clump. Remember Cleveland once upon a time? Oh, maybe they're going to start stripping off parts and that'll be attractive. Why are they trading anybody away? They're in the 4th seed right now in the Eastern Conference. They're winning
without Garland and Mobley. They go out and win. Every night, doesn't matter who they play, they win. Craig Portis Jr. starts at point guard, they win. It doesn't matter.
Yep, 8-2 for the Pacers over these runs. So like it's just this other thing. It's like while this is happening for Brooklyn right now, having an all-time bad run, you can't seem to figure anything out. Nothing's going right. Guess what? All these other teams that felt like they were in your group, they're just kind of incrementally moving themselves up. They're all on the positive side of their record. So it's really starting to paint a dimmer and dimmer picture for the Brooklyn Nets. Last one here, since we're having fun talking negative. Johnny boy, he's back in here. The Dinwiddie Brooklyn Nets divorce feels way too obvious. Could Brooklyn trade Spencer to the Magic for Wendell Carter Jr. and another player to bring in some necessary energy to the team? I think the only, just from a high level in terms of trades around Spencer Dinwiddie, he's an expiring contract. There's not a lot of value. I don't know. There's just like a world where the Nets are, putting a pick together with a Spencer Dinwiddie to go get, if they want to get something of impact. Otherwise, it's just trying to get the money moved away and I pick up a second round.
Who's trading for him?
That's what I mean. What is the who's beating down the door now for Spencer Dinwiddie?
I thought there was no Dinwiddie market when he was playing well,
just based on position and everything else. Exactly.
When he was playing okay, we went through the possible Dinwiddie suitors, and the list was so short, right? And that was when things were kind of okay. Now they're not. I don't go look through the teams. I don't know why Orlando would do that. I know they have some guard issues. I mean, Fultz is on his way back. They have Cole Anthony. They drafted Anthony Black. I just don't know I just don't see Dinwiddie as like being the guy there. I could be wrong. They really need shooting too, and it's like he doesn't really provide that either. So it's like I don't know why they would do that. But maybe. But really go through the list again when it was going well, who he could like fit, who he could go fit in with, and now it looks like he's kind of checked out. I just don't know where the list is.
You know what I will say is, and I'm going to get out the door here. For me personally, I think Doug will come with me probably. I did think about the Pacers and with the injuries that they've had and just being like, hey, you need a little stopgap here. Like that was a kind of team, like that's really what you're hunting for right now. If you're the Brooklyn Nets or if you're fans, it's who's a team that's taken some injuries and really just needs a guy to come in and eat some minutes for them. But when you look at some of those teams and they keep winning basketball games, it becomes harder and harder to think they need or would be willing to take on that kind of value, right? So it'll be interesting to see. Still a little bit of time here before we get to the deadline. And obviously the Nets got basketball games they'll need to play. And hopefully, from that standpoint, Spencer Dinwiddie finds some form because the Nets still need quality players on the court, as we saw tonight.
All right, we're going to get out of here. Much appreciated everyone that jumped here. Cutting this one a little shorter than usual. Usually go about half hour, 40 minutes in the live, but I'm going to do this a little different. As a programming note, we will not be doing any lives on the West Coast trip. We're going to do those the next day. Just gets a little too late for your boys. Not look.
Somebody suggested I'm in my late 40s, early 50s, Doug. So obviously I'm too old to stay up for these games, regardless of my age.
Yeah, I value just like the Nets against the Bucks. We need a little rest. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Much appreciated. Thanks. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast.
Basketball, basketball, basketball. Yeah.